Every captain learns one unbreakable rule on day one. Never make enemies at 40,000 feet. You never know who's sitting behind you, standing beside you, or walking through your cabin.
Here are the final
Captain
passenger
Bradley
counts.
Ashford
Thank
doesn't
you.
just break
Let me
that
confirm
rule,
these.
he
Of
turns
course.
it into a performance.
You
A
delayed the
loud,
entire
public,
flight!
unforgettable
This is
performance.
unacceptable!
Today, on
You're
Flight
grounded!
741 from London to Singapore, he's about to stand in front of 310 passengers and humiliate the one person on this entire aircraft who can save his life. Because the flight attendant he just called incompetent, she's not just a flight attendant, she hasn't been just anything for a very long time. And in 6 hours, when his throat closes shut and his body starts shutting down somewhere over the Indian Ocean, she'll be the only thing standing between him and a body bag at 42,000 feet. It's 7:14 a.m. London Heathrow, Terminal 5, Gate A18. The massive Airbus A380 sits at the gate like a sleeping giant, its double-decker frame casting long shadows across the wet tarmac. Ground crew in high-visibility vests load the last cargo containers into the belly of the aircraft, catering trucks pull away one by one, their job done. The morning fog is lifting slowly, giving way to pale English sunlight that washes across the terminal glass in long golden streaks. Inside the gate area, 310 passengers wait in various states of anticipation. Business travelers in sharp suits check emails on their phones one last time. Families with oversized carry-ons try to keep children entertained. A group of university students heading to Southeast Asia for the first time take selfies with the giant A380 visible through the windows behind them. Flight 741. London Heathrow to Singapore Changi, 14 hours and 20 minutes. One of the longest routes this airline operates. The kind of flight where everything has to work perfectly, because when something goes wrong at this distance, the options are limited and the consequences are enormous. Captain Bradley Ashford walks through the terminal like he owns it. Not just the gate, the entire terminal. 52 years old, 28 years in the cockpit, silver hair combed back with the kind of precision that suggests a man who spends real time in front of a mirror every morning. His uniform is immaculate, 4 gold stripes on each shoulder pressed to perfection, polished shoes that reflect the terminal lighting, a Breitling Navi timer on his left wrist that catches the light with every confident step. He carries himself with the kind of authority that fills a room before he even opens his mouth. People notice him, they always do. Gate agents stand a little straighter. Ground staff step aside. He moves through Heathrow like a man who has been doing this for so long that the airport itself has learned to accommodate him. Ashford is old school, came up through the ranks when pilots were treated like gods, when the cockpit door meant absolute authority and the captain's word was law from pushback to parking. He never got the memo that the era ended. He's flown every long-haul route this airline has: Singapore, Sydney, Sao Paulo, Johannesburg, Los Angeles, Tokyo. His official record is clean. His safety file is spotless on paper, but off the record, crew members talk. They talk in galleys and crew rest areas and hotel lobbies. They talk about the way he dismisses concerns without looking up from his clipboard. The way he treats cabin crew like furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. The way he once told a junior first officer to shut up and fly after the young man raised a concern about a fuel discrepancy. Ashford doesn't listen. Ashford doesn't collaborate. Ashford commands. And today, walking toward gate A18 with his roller bag trailing behind him, he's already in a bad mood. A schedule change put him on this Singapore flight instead of his preferred New York route. He didn't sleep well. His neighbor's renovation kept him up past midnight. His coffee was cold at the crew lounge, and he's carrying something else with him today, something heavier than a bad mood, a secret he's kept from the airline medical team for 3 years, a severe tree nut allergy, anaphylaxis level severe, the kind that requires an EpiPen, the kind that should be flagged on every crew manifest and every catering order. But admitting a weakness, disclosing a vulnerability, that's not something Bradley Ashford does. Not ever. Not to anyone. Camille Foster is already at the gate when Ashford arrives. 38 years old, 5 years as a flight attendant, but those 5 years tell only the second chapter of her story. The first chapter is longer, darker, and far more impressive. Before the uniform, before the beverage carts and safety demonstrations and polite smiles, Camille Foster was Dr. Camille Foster, emergency medicine specialist, 8 years in one of London's busiest trauma centers, Royal London Hospital, Whitechapel, the kind of place where ambulances arrive every 6 minutes and the waiting room never empties. She's held beating hearts in her hands during open chest resuscitations. She's performed emergency tracheotomies in the back of ambulances racing through London traffic. She's administered epinephrine to anaphylaxis patients so many times that she can calculate the dosage in her sleep. She's kept people alive when every monitor in the room said they were already dead. And she's lost people too, held their hands as the light left their eyes, and gone back to work the next morning because that's what emergency doctors do. She left medicine because the burnout nearly destroyed her. 60-hour weeks became 70-hour weeks. The nightmares stopped being occasional and became nightly. She started seeing patients' faces in crowds, hearing monitor alarms in quiet rooms. A therapist told her she needed to step away, completely, not a vacation, a new life. Flying became her therapy, a fresh start, new cities, new skies, new routines, a quieter life where the stakes were beverage choices and blanket requests instead of blood and broken bones. But the training never left her body, the instincts never dulled. Even now, 5 years removed from the ER, she still notices things other people miss. The slight tremor in a passenger's hand that could indicate low blood sugar. The color change in someone's face that might signal cardiac trouble. The subtle shift in breathing patterns that most people wouldn't notice, but that screams something is wrong to a trained medical eye. Today, she's the lead flight attendant on the upper deck of the A380. Her uniform is perfect. 3 service pins line her lapel, excellence awards, each one earned. She's calm, organized, and ready for a 14-hour flight. She has absolutely no idea what's coming. The confrontation starts before the passengers even finish boarding. Ashford arrives at the gate area and spots Camille reviewing the passenger manifest with the gate agent. They're standing at the desk, going over seat assignments and special meal requests. Something about Camille bothers Ashford immediately. Maybe it's the confidence in her posture. She stands straight, speaks clearly, makes eye contact. Maybe it's the fact that she's talking to the gate agent as a colleague, as an equal, not as someone beneath the pilot hierarchy. Whatever it is, it irritates him. He walks over, doesn't introduce himself, doesn't say good morning, doesn't extend a hand. He looks at Camille, then looks at the gate agent and says 6 words that 310 passengers will remember for years. His exact words: "This woman is incompetent. I don't want her on my aircraft." He says it loud, deliberately, performatively loud. Not a private concern whispered to an agent, a public declaration designed to humiliate. Passengers in the first 3 rows of the boarding area turn their heads. A mother pulls her young daughter closer. A businessman in a gray suit lowers his Financial Times and stares. 2 teenagers with earbuds pull them out to hear better. A retired couple exchange a glance that says, "Did that really just happen?" The gate agent freezes. Her mouth opens slightly, but nothing comes out. Camille doesn't flinch, not a muscle. She looks at Ashford with an expression that's almost clinical, detached, analytical, calm, the same look she used to give panicking relatives in the ER who were screaming in her face while she was trying to save their loved ones. She's been yelled at by people watching their children die. A pilot with a bad attitude doesn't even register on her scale. She asks calmly what his specific concern is. Ashford doesn't answer the question. He tells the gate agent he wants a different lead attendant. Now, the gate agent, visibly uncomfortable and aware that dozens of passengers are watching this unfold, explains that crew changes aren't possible 30 minutes before departure. Ashford's jaw tightens. A vein appears on his temple. He mutters something about standards declining and the airline hiring anyone who can smile and push a cart, then turns and walks toward the jet bridge without another word. Camille watches him go. She doesn't react, doesn't complain, doesn't roll her eyes or shake her head. She turns back to the gate agent, gives her a reassuring nod, and continues reviewing the manifest as if nothing happened. But inside, she files it away. Notes the behavior, notes the aggression, notes the public nature of the attack. She's seen this before, not in aviation, but in medicine. The senior surgeon who screams at nurses to feel powerful, the consultant who humiliates juniors to maintain control, the authority figure who mistakes cruelty for leadership. What Ashford doesn't know, what he can't possibly know as he disappears down the jet bridge, is that the woman he just humiliated in front of 310 passengers has saved more lives before breakfast than he's saved in his entire 28-year career. But the real problem hasn't started yet, because somewhere in the catering that's already loaded onto this aircraft, in a premium first-class meal box labeled with the wrong allergen information, there's a panna cotta dessert topped with crushed pistachios. The label says contains dairy. It doesn't mention tree nuts. A labeling error at the catering facility, the kind of small, invisible mistake that happens once in 10,000 meals. And Captain Bradley Ashford, who never told anyone about his allergy because his pride wouldn't allow it, is about to eat every last bite of that dessert at 42,000 feet over the Indian Ocean. And when his body turns against him, the only person who can stop it will be the woman he tried to throw off his airplane. 3 hours into the flight, the A380 cruises at 42,000 feet above Eastern Europe, somewhere over Romania. The seatbelt signs are off. Cabin lights have been dimmed to a comfortable cruise setting, that warm amber glow that makes everything feel safe and routine. The first meal service is well underway. The gentle clatter of trays and the quiet hum of the engines create a rhythm that feels like normalcy. Everything looks routine. Everything feels routine, but it's not even close. Ashford is in the cockpit with First Officer Daniel Reeves, a 31-year-old with 5 years of experience and the quiet temperament of someone who learned early that silence is survival around certain captains. Reeves has brown hair, calm eyes, and the kind of steady hands that make good pilots great. He noticed the scene at the gate. He was standing at the end of the jet bridge when it happened, close enough to hear every word Ashford said to the flight attendant. He noticed the volume. He noticed the cruelty. He noticed the 310 witnesses. He said nothing. That's the unwritten rule with captains like Ashford. You don't challenge, you don't question, you don't rock the boat. You fly the plane, you do your job, and you collect your paycheck. But Reeves is watching, quietly cataloging every interaction, every tone, every dismissal, because Reeves didn't become a pilot to work for bullies. He became a pilot to fly, and he's starting to wonder how long he can stay quiet. Up on the upper deck, Camille runs the meal service with the precision of a surgical team. Trays out on schedule, beverages poured without spills, special meals distributed to the correct seats, dietary requests honored to the letter. She moves through the cabin like she's been doing this for 20 years, not 5. There's a fluidity to her work that comes from something deeper than training. It comes from years of performing under pressure where the stakes were life and death. Serving meals to 300 people feels almost meditative when your previous job involved keeping gunshot victims alive long enough to reach the operating table. A woman in 62A comments quietly to her seatmate that the lead attendant seems remarkably calm and professional, almost unnaturally so. Camille overhears it, smiles, just smiles, says nothing. The first incident happens at hour 4. Ashford calls the cabin on the intercom. His tone isn't a request, it's a command. He wants his meal brought to the cockpit immediately, not when it's convenient, not when the service flow allows. Now, the way he says it makes the junior attendant who answers the call flinch. Camille steps in. She prepares Ashford's tray personally. She always takes the difficult tasks herself, a habit from the ER where she never asked nurses to do anything she wouldn't do first. She walks the tray to the cockpit door, knocks. Ashford opens it, doesn't acknowledge her, doesn't make eye contact, takes the tray from her hands like she's a vending machine and closes the cockpit door without a single word. Camille stands there for exactly 2 seconds, looking at the closed door. Then she turns and walks back to the galley. She notes the time in her head, notes the behavior, old habits from the ER, document everything, even if you don't know why yet, especially if you don't know why yet. But what she doesn't see is what's on that tray. The first-class meal is correctly prepared sainches, grilled salmon with a lemon butter sauce, roasted vegetables with herbs, a fresh side salad with vinaigrette, all safe, all standard. But the dessert, a vanilla panna cotta with a pistachio crumble topping, that's the invisible threat. The catering label on the meal box says contains dairy. It doesn't mention tree nuts. It should. Pistachios are tree nuts. But a worker at the catering facility entered the wrong allergen code, and the automated label printed without the nut warning. The kind of small, invisible, bureaucratic mistake that happens somewhere in the world every single day. Usually it doesn't matter. Today it does. Hour 5. Ashford eats the dessert in the cockpit while reviewing flight plans on his tablet, every spoonful. He doesn't notice the pistachio flavor because it's masked by vanilla bean and heavy cream. The texture seems like a normal crumble. Almond flour, he assumes, or biscuit. He finishes it, sets the empty dish on the tray. 30 minutes pass, nothing. He feels normal. 45 minutes, still nothing. He starts to relax, and then at the 52-minute mark, it begins. A tingling sensation in his lower lip. Subtle at first, like the feeling you get when circulation returns to a numb limb. Ashford touches his mouth, runs his tongue across the inside of his lower lip. Something feels different. Thicker, he swallows. His throat feels slightly tight. Not dramatically, not enough to worry about, just enough to notice, just enough to make him swallow hard twice in a row. He takes a long sip of water. The tingling doesn't go away. It spreads to his upper lip. He doesn't say anything to Reeves, because admitting something is wrong means admitting vulnerability, and Captain Bradley Ashford has built his entire identity, his entire career, on the principle that he is never vulnerable, never uncertain, never wrong. So he says nothing. He takes another sip of water and stares at the instruments. Things are about to get much worse. Hour 6. The aircraft is now over Iraq, heading southeast toward the Persian Gulf. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky is an endless deep blue. Below, the desert stretches in every direction like a vast brown ocean. Inside the cockpit, Captain Ashford is deteriorating. His symptoms have been accelerating for the past 40 minutes, and he can no longer pretend they don't exist. His face is flushed, a deep, uncomfortable red that starts at his neck and spreads upward. His hands are swelling visibly, the skin around his fingers puffy and tight, his Breitling watch now uncomfortably snug on his wrist. He's breathing through his mouth because his nasal passages are closing. Each breath slightly louder than the last, slightly more effortful. Reeves glances over and asks if he's all right. Ashford snaps back that he's fine, just tired, just the dry cabin air getting to him. Nothing to worry about. Go back to your instruments. Reeves looks at Ashford's hands. They're visibly swollen now, the knuckles disappearing under puffy skin, the fingertips turning a shade of dark pink. He looks at Ashford's face. The redness isn't normal flush. It's reactive, medical. Reeves isn't a doctor, but he knows what not right looks like. He doesn't push the conversation. He turns back to his instruments, but his right hand moves quietly to the intercom. He's going to call the cabin. Meanwhile, in the upper deck galley, Camille is clearing the post-meal trays when something catches her eye. She picks up Ashford's return tray from the cockpit service cart. The main course is half-eaten, typical for pilots who eat while monitoring instruments, but the dessert plate is completely clean. The panna cotta is gone, every bite. And there, on the edge of the white ceramic plate, she sees it. A small fragment of pistachio crumble, green, unmistakable. She picks up the plate and looks at it closely. Then she picks up the catering label, reads it. Contains dairy. She reads it again. No mention of nuts, no mention of tree nuts, no mention of pistachios. She holds the plate in one hand and the label in the other, and something deep in her medical training starts to hum. She doesn't know Ashford has an allergy. She has no medical file on him. She has no reason to suspect anything specific. But she sees the discrepancy between what's on the plate and what's on the label, and something, instinct, training, 8 years of pattern recognition in the ER, makes her pause. She sets the plate aside carefully, keeps the label, puts both in a clean plastic bag, and stores them in the galley cabinet. Another ER habit: preserve the evidence. Always preserve the evidence. You never know when it matters. Today, it's going to matter more than she can imagine. And then the call comes, hour 6 and 22 minutes. The cockpit intercom buzzes in the galley. It's Reeves. His voice is controlled but carries an edge of urgency that experienced cabin crew recognize immediately. The sound of someone who is trained to stay calm but is very much not calm inside. He says the captain isn't feeling well. He says there's facial swelling. He says the captain is having difficulty breathing. He asks if the medical kit is accessible. The words are careful, measured, precise, the kind of language pilots are trained to use when they don't want to cause panic but they need help coming fast. Camille's response is immediate, no hesitation, no questions about whether it's serious enough to warrant action. She asks Reeves for a full symptom list. He describes facial swelling concentrated around the lips and eyes, redness spreading down the neck, difficulty breathing, audible wheeze, swollen hands, rapid pulse. The words land in Camille's brain and arrange themselves into a pattern she has seen hundreds of times. Anaphylaxis, severe allergic reaction, progressive, potentially fatal if untreated. Her heart rate doesn't change. Her breathing stays even. Her hands remain steady, but inside her mind, a switch flips. A door opens that she closed 5 years ago when she left the hospital for the last time. She's not a flight attendant anymore. Not in this moment. She's a doctor, and she has a patient going into anaphylactic shock at 42,000 feet with limited equipment, no hospital, and no backup. She opens the onboard medical kit, checks the contents with practice speed, 2 epinephrine auto-injectors, oral antihistamines, injectable antihistamines, supplemental oxygen with mask, basic airway management tools, a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope. It's not an ER, it's not even close. But she's worked with less. She's kept people alive with nothing but her hands and a prayer. This will work. She closes the kit, grabs it, and heads for the cockpit. As she walks through the upper deck cabin with the medical kit, she passes the passengers in premium class. Some are sleeping under soft blankets. Some are watching movies with oversized headphones. A child is coloring in a book. None of them know that the man flying this aircraft is going into anaphylactic shock. None of them know that the next 20 minutes will determine whether this flight lands safely or becomes a headline. What Ashford doesn't realize, what he physically cannot realize because his throat is swelling shut and his blood pressure is dropping like a stone, is that the woman he called incompetent this morning is the only person on this entire aircraft with the training, the experience, and the nerve to reverse what's happening to his body. The only one. And she's 30 steps away, walking calmly, medical kit in hand, already calculating epinephrine dosages in her head. Camille reaches the cockpit door. She knocks twice. Firm, professional. Reeves opens it immediately. He's been waiting, watching the door, hoping it would open fast, and what Camille sees when she steps through that door stops her for exactly 1 second. 1 single second where the flight attendant disappears and the doctor takes over completely. Ashford is slumped in his seat. His face is swollen almost beyond recognition. His lips are enormous, ballooned to 3 times their normal size. His eyes are nearly swollen shut, just thin slits of white visible between puffy, inflamed lids. His skin is a deep, angry crimson from his hairline to his collar. His breathing is a high-pitched wheeze, the terrifying sound of air forcing itself through an airway that is actively closing. His hands are gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles have gone white beneath the swelling, and his chest heaves with every labored breath. He's conscious, barely, and he's terrified. The most arrogant man on this aircraft, the man who told 310 passengers that this woman was incompetent, is now the most helpless person at 42,000 feet. He looks at Camille, the woman he tried to remove from his flight, the woman he wouldn't look at when she brought his meal, and in his swollen, desperate, barely open eyes, there's something she's seen 1,000 times before in the emergency room. The look of a person who knows they're dying and has realized too late that they can't save themselves. Camille doesn't hesitate, not for a heartbeat. She pushes past Reeves into the cockpit and drops to her knees beside Ashford's seat. Her hands move with the muscle memory of 8 years in emergency medicine. Automatic, precise, efficient. No wasted movement. She checks his airway first, narrowing fast, the tissue visibly inflamed, the wheeze getting higher in pitch, which means the opening is getting smaller. She checks his pulse. Rapid at 140, weak and thready, blood pressure dropping as his cardiovascular system floods with histamine. Classic anaphylaxis. Textbook presentation, severe. She has minutes to act, maybe less. She opens the medical kit and pulls out the first epinephrine auto-injector. Ashford's eyes widen with panic. He tries to speak, tries to say something, but his throat is too swollen to produce anything more than a desperate wet gurgle. He reaches for Camille's arm with his swollen hand, grabs it. The same arm that belongs to the woman he publicly humiliated 4 hours ago. Camille doesn't pull away. She doesn't remind him of what he said. She doesn't hesitate, because that's what real professionals do. They save people, even the ones who don't deserve it. She tells Reeves 3 things in rapid succession. First, contact the airline's ground medical support team on the satellite phone immediately. Second, begin preparing for a possible emergency diversion. They'll need the nearest suitable airport with medical facilities. Third, do not leave the left seat under any circumstances. Someone needs to fly this aircraft. Reeves nods and starts working. His hands are shaking slightly, but his training holds. Camille turns back to Ashford. She tells him to stay still. Her voice is calm, controlled. The voice of a doctor who has done this more times than she can count. She drives the epinephrine auto-injector into his lateral thigh, firm, decisive, through the fabric of his uniform trousers. She holds it for a full 10 seconds, counting silently, withdraws it, sets it aside. Then she tilts his head back to maximize the airway opening, positioning his jaw forward in a maneuver that paramedics call the jaw thrust. Something no flight attendant should know, but something every emergency physician practices until it's automatic. She places the supplemental oxygen mask over his swollen face, adjusting the flow to maximum. She administers oral antihistamines, crushed between 2 spoons and dissolved in a small amount of water because he can barely swallow. Then she sets her watch and begins monitoring his pulse every 30 seconds. Every 30 seconds. Counting, waiting, watching for the epinephrine to hit his bloodstream and begin reversing the cascade of destruction happening inside his body. 2 minutes pass, the longest 2 minutes in that cockpit. Reeves is on the satellite phone with the airline medical team. He can hear the doctor on the ground asking questions. Camille, without looking up from Ashford, starts calling out information to relay. Epinephrine, 0.3 milligrams administered intramuscularly at 1322 UTC. Patient presenting with severe angioedema, urticaria, bronchospasm, and early signs of hypotension. Suspected trigger, tree nut ingestion via mislabeled catering item. Reeves repeats the words into the phone. The ground doctor goes quiet for a moment, then asks who is providing the medical assessment. Reeves tells him it's the lead flight attendant. There's a pause on the line. A long pause. Then the ground doctor clears the treatment plan that Camille has already initiated. He doesn't second-guess a single decision she's made. At the 4-minute mark, the epinephrine begins to work. The swelling in Ashford's throat slows its progression. His breathing, still labored and wheezy, stops getting worse. The high-pitched whistle drops half a tone. Still there, still frightening, but no longer accelerating toward complete obstruction. His blood pressure stabilizes. Doesn't improve yet, but stabilizes. Camille watches his face. The crimson flush is still intense, but the rate of swelling has plateaued. She allows herself one small breath of relief. He's responding. The epinephrine is working, but she knows from hundreds of cases in the ER that anaphylaxis is deceptive. It can retreat and then come roaring back. Biphasic reaction, up to 12 hours later. He needs a hospital, soon. The decision is made to divert to Mumbai, the nearest major airport with advanced medical facilities. Reeves takes full command of the aircraft, enters the new routing into the flight management computer, and begins coordinating with Bahrain air traffic control for the course change. The A380 banks gently to the right, turning south toward India. 310 passengers feel the subtle shift in direction. Some look up from their screens. Most don't notice. Camille stays in the cockpit. She doesn't leave Ashford's side for a single minute. She administers a second dose of oral antihistamine at the 20-minute mark, checks his vitals continuously. At 30 minutes post-epinephrine, his breathing has improved significantly. The wheeze is still there, but softer. His lips are still swollen, but the progression has stopped. His eyes can open halfway now. He looks at Camille, really looks at her. For the first time since she boarded this aircraft, Captain Bradley Ashford sees Camille Foster. Not a flight attendant, not incompetent, not someone beneath him. He sees the person who is keeping him alive. And for the first time in his 28-year career, Bradley Ashford has absolutely nothing to say. Camille tells Reeves the captain will need hospital observation for a minimum of 24 hours. Biphasic reactions can occur up to 12 hours after the initial episode and can be equally severe or worse. Reeves nods. He doesn't question her assessment. Nobody on this aircraft questions her anymore. The A380 begins its descent into Mumbai. The cabin crew informs the 310 passengers of a medical diversion. In premium class, the passenger who witnessed the gate confrontation, the businessman who lowered his Financial Times, leans over to his wife and whispers something. She looks toward the upper deck galley, shakes her head slowly, and says something that makes him nod in agreement. The landing is textbook. Reeves puts the A380 down at Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport on runway 27 with the kind of smooth precision that would make any training captain proud. Emergency medical vehicles are already positioned on the tarmac, their lights flashing blue and red in the Mumbai afternoon heat. The forward door opens. Paramedics board. Camille gives them a full medical handover. Drug administered, dosages, timestamps, vital sign trends, suspected allergen, catering evidence preserved. The paramedics listen to her briefing, and one of them, a senior emergency technician, looks at her and asks where she practiced. Not if she practiced, where. She answers quietly, Royal London Hospital, 8 years. He nods like that explains everything, because it does. Ashford is transferred to a stretcher. As the paramedics prepare to carry him off the aircraft, he reaches for Camille's hand. His grip is weak, his body is exhausted from the allergic assault, but it's deliberate. He squeezes her hand once, doesn't speak, can't speak, not really. But the squeeze says something. It's not an apology, not yet, but it's an acknowledgement. The kind that only comes when a person has stared at their own death and realized who was standing between them and the end. The passengers deplane into the Mumbai terminal for an unexpected layover while the airline arranges a replacement crew. Word spreads immediately. The gate incident, which dozens of passengers witnessed and several recorded, is now horrifying context for what just happened. The captain who called the flight attendant incompetent was saved by that same flight attendant. The story writes itself. Passengers talk about it in the terminal. They post about it on social media while waiting for updates. A business traveler from seat 61K writes a detailed account on his social media that will eventually be shared over 100,000 times. The comments section fills with thousands of responses. The narrative is universal. Arrogance met competence, and competence won. The airline's response is swift and comprehensive. Within 48 hours, a formal internal investigation begins. It uncovers 3 critical findings. First, Captain Bradley Ashford failed to disclose a severe tree nut allergy on his aviation medical evaluation, a direct violation of airline policy, civil aviation medical standards, and potentially criminal negligence regarding his duty of care to passengers and crew. Second, the catering company made a labeling error that failed to identify pistachio content in the first-class dessert, a quality control failure with immediate safety implications. Third, Camille Foster's medical intervention was clinically flawless and directly, unambiguously saved the captain's life. Ashford spends 4 days in a Mumbai hospital recovering. The anaphylaxis resolves completely. His body heals. His career doesn't. The undisclosed allergy triggers a full medical review. His pilot medical certificate is suspended immediately pending investigation. The airline grounds him from all flight duties. His union representative attempts to negotiate, argues privacy, argues precedent, argues that the allergy wasn't relevant because he managed it himself. The Aviation Authority disagrees, concealing a life-threatening medical condition from your employer, from the medical examiner, and from the crew who needs to know in case of exactly this kind of emergency. That isn't a gray area. That's a disqualifying failure of judgment. 6 months later, Bradley Ashford is no longer a captain. His medical certificate has been permanently revoked, not for having the allergy the authority makes clear, but for the deliberate, sustained concealment of it. Had he disclosed the condition when it was first diagnosed, accommodations could have been made. Modified catering protocols, crew awareness, emergency preparation. Instead, he chose pride over safety. He chose ego over protocol. He chose silence over responsibility. He now works as a ground operations consultant for a small regional carrier outside London. Smaller office. No cockpit window, no 4 gold stripes, no Breitling catching the light as he walks through Heathrow. He submitted a formal written apology to Camille Foster 3 months after the incident. The letter is 3 paragraphs long. In it, he uses a word he has never used in 28 years of professional aviation. The word is wrong. He writes that he was wrong about her, wrong to say what he said, wrong to treat her the way he did. It's the hardest thing he's ever written. Camille Foster's trajectory moves in the opposite direction. The airline awards her its highest crew commendation, the Safety Excellence Medal, given fewer than 10 times in the company's 60-year history. The CEO presents it personally at a company-wide event. Her medical background, which she never advertised and never used for leverage, becomes known across the airline and beyond. She's offered a newly created position, In-Flight Medical Response Coordinator. Her job is to redesign how cabin crew are trained in advanced emergency medical procedures, not basic first aid, but real medicine, real assessment, real intervention. She accepts. Her first training module is on anaphylaxis recognition and treatment. Within a year, it becomes mandatory for every crew member at the airline. Within 18 months, 3 other international carriers adopt the same program. The module carries her name. First Officer Daniel Reeves is promoted to captain 8 months after the incident. During his promotion review, he cites Flight 741 as the defining moment of his career. Not for the emergency itself, but for what it taught him about leadership. He tells the review board that the best captains aren't the ones who know everything. They're the ones who know who to listen to. And on Flight 741, the person worth listening to was the one the captain tried to silence. The catering company conducts a full allergen labeling audit. The error that nearly killed Bradley Ashford triggers an industry-wide review of in-flight meal allergen protocols. New standards are drafted, tested, and implemented across 14 airlines within 2 years. A mistake that almost cost one man his life ends up protecting millions of passengers who will never know how close the system came to failing. And Camille Foster? She still flies. Once a month, she works a long-haul flight, not because she has to. Her new role is office-based, but because she wants to. She says the sky still heals her, that the hum of the engines at cruise altitude is the closest thing she's found to silence. And every time she walks through a boarding gate in her uniform, 3 service pins on her lapel, and a quiet confidence in her step, she carries herself the same way she always has. Calm, professional, quiet. The kind of person you'd walk past without a second glance, the kind of person you'd be an absolute fool to underestimate, because arrogance doesn't check credentials. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't look past the uniform to see the surgeon's hands underneath. And at 42,000 feet, when the body is failing and the airway is closing and the ego has nowhere left to hide, the only thing that matters is competence, real competence. The kind that's earned in emergency rooms and trauma bays and the worst nights of people's lives. The kind you can't fake, can't buy, and can't shout down, no matter how many gold stripes you wear on your shoulders.